Welcome back to the GTN show. This week we have all the drama and excitement from the second round of the PTO T100 World Triathlon Tour in Singapore. More concerns over the Paris Olympics water quality and AI running shoes. Let's go. Okay, kicking off with reacts, as we normally do. Things we've spotted on social media, the internet, things that have jumped out at us. And starting with this one, appreciation post from Sam Laidlow. And he does actually say, warning, current hotel and breakfast may have made me biased. I'm guessing it was quite a nice hotel in Singapore. They were staying in ahead of the T100. Get onto the results and the action that went on there. But this appreciation post from him essentially talks about his career in triathlon and how it wouldn't have been made anywhere near as viable had it not been for the PTO and the T100 World Triathlon Tour. He goes on to say kind of the earnings that he got from things like the Canadian Open and various other events has basically allowed him to go on to do races like the Ironman World Championships in Kona and prepare for it as best as possible, taking teams out to it, and just essentially making a career out of his hobby, out of this sport. So really lovely post, very heartfelt, and just a lovely appreciation from him ahead of the race. As I said, get onto the action from that shortly. Another one ahead of the Singapore race from Magnus Ditlev, unfortunately not so great. He actually had a little bike incident, I'm guessing whilst out training in Singapore, going over a speed bump. Little spill, fell on his wrist, and it turns out from a scan in hospital shows that he has got a fracture in the left wrist of the scaphoid bone in that left wrist. And whilst knowing Magnus, he probably would have given it a go and probably been fine. He's decided not to chance it and to actually rest and recover. So you would have seen him on the sidelines cheering other athletes on, but I hope he recovers very quickly. And final one from Javier Gomez, again ahead of Singapore. Sadly, this one is really quite unfortunate news. Ahead of the race, he got a call from his mother's doctor, his mother is unwell at the moment, basically saying that her health was declining and that they suspect she probably hasn't got too much longer to live. He decided to fly straight out to see his mother and spend time with the family, and managed to spend a few days with the family before her finally passing away, unfortunately, on Sunday. He actually goes on to say, my mum was not only the kindest, sweetest and most loving person I've ever known, but an unconditional and key support in my career since the very beginning. She will be missed so much by many and always remembered by those who had the chance to cross paths with her in their lives. We're ever so sorry to hear this news. Our thoughts do go out to you. As I said, fortunately not to see Javier on the start list or on the start line in Singapore. We'll get onto the action from that very shortly. And now moving on to the Tri News, and having spoken in depth last week about the Paris Olympics water quality and the measures they're taking to try and clean up the Seine, it appears there really are some serious concerns that the swim leg will have to be cancelled. Now, this comes off recent testing by the charity Surfrider Foundation Europe that revealed alarming levels of E. coli in the River Seine, which has actually led to the Paris 2024 president saying that the swimming leg of the triathlon at this summer's Olympics could be cancelled if heavy rain affects water quality in the River Seine. And goes on to say, we can postpone for rainy conditions because it's programmed at the beginning of the games, so we can wait for better conditions. We're confident that it will be possible to use the Seine. And there is a final decision where we could not swim. It's part of the rules of the International Federation. It's what we want to avoid, of course. Now, currently the schedule for the Olympics is set as the Olympics starting the 26th of July, the men's and women's triathlon starting on the 30th and 31st of July, respectively, and then the mixed team relay on the 5th of August. Then the Seine will also host the marathon swimming event and also the paratriathlon event starting on the 28th of August. Now, as we discussed last week, they're already putting 1.4 billion euros into some regeneration technologies and various other things to the River Seine to try and clean up by things such as rainwater storage basins and various other things to try and reduce that risk of pollution. But currently, Surfrider Foundation Europe said 14 water samples taken near the bridge where the triathlon would start, the marathon swimming, the paratriathlon would start, basically deemed unfit and failed safety standards. And obviously, if they have heavy rainfall in the lead up to the events, well, that is seriously going to raise bacteria levels. So fingers crossed, but it's not sounding great at the moment. And now for what the tech, my favourite part of the show, starting with this one from Nike, which has really caught my eye. They've unveiled 13 hyper-futuristic athletic shoes designed using AI for some of their top athletes ahead of the Paris 2024 Olympics. Now, the designs themselves won't actually be available for purchase, but they feature some wild designs, such as kind of this helix of fabric that wraps up around the ankles. They're all different and individual for each athlete that has helped design them. How they've gone about this is interviewing some of their top athletes and then using AI to essentially create what they have discussed, what they have imagined during these interviews. And the models were dubbed part of their AIR collection, standing for Athlete Imagined Revolution, obviously a play on the brand's famous air technology they use in a lot of their shoes. They're pretty wild. To be clear, I may be wrong here, I don't think these are actually for competition, more of a marketing purpose ahead of the Olympics, but still pretty cool. Talking of Nike, this one caught my eye. A Paralympian has criticised Nike for using amputee mannequins to promote some of their products, but not actually selling single shoes. Now, this actually comes from Steph Reed, who is a multiple Olympian, who says she always had to buy pairs of running shoes, particularly from Nike. And she says the company that portray an image of diversity and inclusion should back it up with action. Now, Nike actually picked up on this and they said, essentially, thank you for raising the issue, said it was exploring opportunities. It added that it hoped to learn from its One Shoe Bank program, currently only available in the US, obviously. The scheme provides single-leg amputees with one free trainer each year, free of charge. Steph actually goes on to say, it's not a case of companies being intentionally non-inclusive, but more a case of nobody's asked the question. And now for the race news. The big race this weekend was the PTO T100 World Triathlon Tour in Singapore in brutal conditions. I was glued to this. We had some fantastic racing. In the women's race, as we've become accustomed to, that was led out on the swim by Lucy Charles-Barkley. She was joined, though, by Lucy Buckingham and Rebecca Clark. Back and forth, around a minute 12 down, we had Hayley Chura. And then of the big favourites, we had Ashley Gentle, 1 minute 38 down in sixth. We had India Lee, who is obviously the Miami winner, down another 6 seconds. And then Chelsea Sodaro, a whopping 4 minutes down out of the swim. That front three, Sue became two as the two Lucys pushed ahead and dropped Rebecca Clark. By the end of the first of 8 10-kilometre laps, they had 55 seconds over Rebecca Clark, with Ashley Gentle now up into fourth with a 1:29 deficit. Going backwards, though, unfortunately, Chelsea Sodaro just seemed to be having a really tough day and actually pulled the plug early on the third lap. And as we got to the back end and the end of the bike, Lucy Buckingham, although had been riding with Lucy Charles-Barkley for the entirety of that ride, seemed to be struggling with cramp as she sort of eased up, stretched her leg out. She still managed to come in very close to Lucy Charles-Barkley, but with a 12-second deficit into T2. And then in third, we had Els Visser coming in a whopping 5 minutes down, and then Ashley Gentle in fourth with a 5:28 deficit. However, as we got onto the run, all the women were running superbly, but Ashley Gentle was just in another league, absolutely flying, and at points taking 30 seconds per kilometre out of Lucy Charles-Barkley. With one lap left, there was just 1 minute between them, and that seemingly inevitable catch came at about 4.1 kilometres to go. She powered clear to take the win, finishing 1:34 ahead of Lucy Charles-Barkley. And then Els Visser completed the podium with Amelia Watkinson just pipping Lucy Buckingham to take fourth. Well, having watched the women the previous day, it was then the men's opportunity the following, and it was Aaron Royal and Alistair Brownlee that led the swim, really putting the hammer down, managing to splinter and separate that field, but coming out still with a group of 7 onto the bike. Although Sam Long had a huge deficit starting that bike of almost 4 minutes. So he was one to watch, but 4 minutes was quite a gap to try and pull back in. Onto the bike, it was a strong, obviously, front group. That was led mostly by Sam Laidlow initially, as everyone was sort of jostling for position over the first 10K. Over the next 15K, we had the likes of Peter Hemrich and Kasper Stepniak managing to bridge up to that group, but still a lot of toing and throwing, people looking around, a lot of messing around, and I've got to be honest, some questionable drafting distances, considering we had the Race Ranger devices on everyone's bike. We saw a lot of red lights popping up, so I think that's probably a conversation for another day, how well the PTO are potentially using those Race Ranger devices. But anyway, that aside, we then saw, unfortunately, Sam Laidlow actually pulling the plug, citing apparently some stomach issues and struggling to just take on fluids, nutrition, various things like that. At this point, actually, it was Yuri Kulin, who was a wild card for the event, that decided to really lay the hammer down. And with about 50 kilometers to go, managed to separate himself from the rest of the group by about 30 seconds initially, although that started to open out. Now, he's actually someone that heading into the race was apparently quietly confident. He's very good in those sort of conditions, apparently, and was hoping to kind of show what he is capable of, particularly after falling under some criticism over the past couple of years due to some drafting or supposed drafting at some events. So yeah, he was seriously seizing the opportunity and, well, yeah, he was showing them. He continued to grow the gap and going into T2 had about a minute gap over Mika Newt, Carl Smith and Alistair Brownlee, who had actually gone in pursuit of him and left the rest of them. Back in 8th, though, after a brilliant bike, it was Sam Long, who had actually brought his deficit down to just 3 minutes and 22 seconds, although did have a 30-second penalty to serve due to an infringement in transition. I think maybe it was his goggles that hadn't gone in the box, but anyway, it's a penalty, unfortunately. Yuri Kulin seemed to be looking very strong and consolidated his lead over the opening kilometres, with the gap to Alistair Brownlee growing to 1 minute and 39 seconds by the 5 kilometre mark. Unfortunately, though, Alistair Brownlee also had a penalty to serve, not for drafting on the bike, though. Nope, it was for his dismount coming into T2. And you'd think a multiple Olympic medalist might have that dialed a little bit better, but this is the heat of the moment and in some tough conditions. Unfortunately, yes, so had to serve a 30-second penalty. And then soon after that, seemed to have some issues with her calf, which is really painful to watch. I'm always dreaming for that day that we're going to see Alistair Brownlee absolutely rip up some of these long-distance races. But anyway, back further into the field, we had Sam Long absolutely on a mission as he was picking up athletes as if they were standing still. After serving his penalty, Long swiftly moved up into second place, just 2 minutes and 30 seconds down on Yuri Kulin with a lap to go, as the battle for third seemed to be coming down to Peter Hemrich and Mika Newt. Well, it was Yuri Kulin that took the win ahead of Sam Long in second, Peter Hemrich in third, David McNamee actually moving up to fourth with a very impressive run, the second fastest of the day, 1:05.51 behind Sam Long's 1:04.12. But yeah, some absolutely phenomenal racing. Be interesting to follow up a little bit more on the drafting, how PTO are using the Race Ranger. But now I've also got the Super Tri E race, which was taking place in London this weekend, which also saw some very exciting racing. Well, this is the first round of their World Championship race series. In a format of 200 metre swim, 4 kilometre bike, 1 kilometre swim, and then into a second round of 1 kilometre run, 4 kilometre bike, 200 metre swim, before a final round of swim, bike, run, but starting in a pursuit format based on whoever's leading and the time differences. Now, on the men's side, it was Chase McQueen that started that final leg with an advantage over the rest of the field of around 11 seconds, posted a solid 2:07 for that 200 metre swim and maintained his advantage going onto the bike and managed to basically extend that even further over the bike and the run to take the win 18 seconds clear of second place Max Stapley. And then in third, we had Maxime Huber and Munzburger. On to the women's race. Well, Well, it was Beth Potter that started the final with a slight advantage over Cassandra Beaugrand, although she actually managed to pull herself level coming out of that swim and starting the bike. Beth Potter fumbled a little bit getting her foot in the shoe, losing a tiny bit of time to Cassandra Beaugrand there. However, finished the bike neck and neck. And I should probably point out that they had quite a big advantage over the rest of the field here, with Katie Safiras half a minute in arrears going into this final leg. Onto the run though, Beth Potter seemingly had a quicker transition, just getting a little bit of advantage starting that 1 kilometre run, and just pulled away to take the win ahead of Cassandra Beaugrand and then Katie Safiras in third. And then this weekend we have tons of racing. Again, it really is snowballing now. So we have Ironman 70.3 Peru, we've got 70.3 Cebu, we also have 70.3 Valencia, which has a huge and stacked field, particularly so on the men's side. We've got over 90 pro men on that start list. And then we've got the Ironman African Championships, in which we'll have a number of male and female athletes trying to get their Kona or their Nice tickets for the Ironman World Championships, in which actually Alistair Brownlee was supposedly one of them, although obviously we'll have to see after this weekend's race and his injury. Say what? Okay, a couple of comments that I want to cover this week. Firstly, after last week's show in which we talked about the hardest geezer and his run across the entire length of Africa, we had a number of comments. Obviously, I can't read them all out, but I think this one here sums them up. Persistence run 444. The other guys did not go point to point. Hardest geezer did. Thus, the other two did not run the entire length, northernmost and southernmost. And yes, you're right. I think it's worth me pointing out, we are huge fans of the hardest geezer. We are super impressed with what he did. And yeah, he ran the entire length. And I will agree with you. He is the first person, in my opinion, to run the entire length of Africa. I made a mistake last week when I was talking about the other people that ran by saying entire when I should have just said length. So I'm happy to put my hands up and say sorry there. Also, we have covered the hardest geezer numerous times on the GTN show, tracking how he's getting on. We are so impressed by what he's done. And by no means did we mean to take away from the phenomenal achievement by him and his team. Merely, a lot of the news around the world were covering the fact that other people were questioning the record, having run the length of Africa, and we felt we should cover and talk about that as it was relevant and newsworthy at the time. On reflection, I probably regret that, because actually, as a lot of you pointed out, just celebrate this amazing achievement by this incredible guy and his team. And I agree with you. So sorry on behalf of GTN, but moving on to some nicer news, a duathlon. If you haven't seen it already, the GTN guys went and did a duathlon here on GTN. Lazy J Racing said, it was a brilliant surprise to see you guys there. I really enjoyed my race. And now I can say I've beaten the GTN guys at a race. I'm sure you weren't taking it too seriously, although your bike speed was. Yeah, nice that you were out there racing. And yeah, if you haven't checked out the GTN guys getting stuck into a duathlon, then do so now. In fact, we just need another 8.2 thousand likes on that video and we might get Sai doing a triathlon. So get hitting that thumbs up now. Also, coming up this weekend, stay tuned because we are doing quite a cool video around the launch of the new Canyon Speedmax CF that we talked about last week. We're getting a newbie, a beginner triathlete on the bike, and we're just going to see how fast they can go. So stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed the show, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. See you next time.